Hi, Michael Scott Overall here. Thinking outside the box seems to require extra effort for me. I'm better suited for making connections, which I'll admit is not always a strength. So when I encounter someone who seems to do this more naturally, no matter their age, I'm impressed, maybe even a bit envious. As a teacher, I had to be careful with the gravitational pull I felt toward those students who challenged me or even disagreed really well with me in class, because at that point, all of us were learning in real time together. In the past, it has sometimes manifested itself as a herd mentality, though. There was that time in the boys' bathroom when one older guy started karate chopping the wall to show how strong he was, and I and several other third graders followed suit until the fourth grade teacher showed up and reamed us out for disrupting her class, which was on the other side of the wall. Or there was the other time at a church fellowship meal when one kid thought it was hilarious how red Jell-o stuck so well to the white spackled ceiling. I guess I thought it was cool too, until my mom dealt with me later that night. Learning to think more critically about what I'm doing or reading has not been without some suffering. Anabasis is the ancient Greek word for the inward journey or the ascent, and today I'm privileged to discuss the consulting world with Isaac Mashman of Mashman Ventures. Isaac showed me early in our conversation that he's one of those people who is more willing to think outside the box than most, and you'll hear how he is making his own path with his company. He's also the host of the podcast Unrivaled Results, and his company Mashman Ventures helps create, maintain, and scale unrivaled personal brands for people who want to be followed, in demand, and respected. I hope you enjoy.
I want every single person who's a member of our team, and even the clients that we work with, to really get this feeling that they can accomplish more. Yeah, well, Michael, thank you again for inviting me on. My name is Isaac Mashman. I run a public relations firm called Mashman Ventures. Born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. I don't come from, and I oftentimes start with kind of my family upbringing and where I come from to let it be known how that influenced me and my path of getting into business and wanting to pursue a greater life. Make money and ultimately be able to do the things and have the options, not so much freedom. All the entrepreneurs online say they want freedom. You have the freedom to make choices and to do what you want, but the thing that you're looking for are options. And options are something that I like. Do I want this medical care or do I want the best medical care? Do I want the generic brand or do I want the actual great brand? The name brand kind of thing. And so I come from, a single parent household and watched my mom struggle a lot growing up, and that influenced me. I was also, a really great student. I'm not one of the D or F students. I was a top 10 student, literally on track to go to Florida State or University of Central Florida, graduated very high, and I realized, I was like, why am I going to go to college? And so part out of rebellion, part out of, hey, I want to go out and see what else is out there, despite my mom, despite my stepdad, and that situation, I jumped into the world of business, and it's been a very challenging, 4 to 5 years, but going through, half a dozen different business ventures, I landed on what I'm doing now, and that's helping people with their personal brands. And I could go a little bit into detail about what, that means and what that is, but it's ultimately working for that life that I didn't get growing up.
Wow. So there's a question that I didn't have on here, but I think is kind of appropriate to your situation, if I can riff on, if you don't mind. What have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced? And I'm going to say as just an entrepreneur, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah, well, I think one of them is honestly getting inside of your head. If I would be completely vulnerable here, mental health I think is something that is oftentimes not discussed, as well as with men especially. There's this stigma that men can't communicate their feelings, or it's just difficult to communicate too, because growing up you see certain male figures and you would never think that they're going through something, but they are. And so that has been one of the biggest things, because you don't have, I don't, my family, my mom early on was, well, Isaac, what the hell are you doing? I worked so you could go to school, and so you would get a full ride scholarship, and I was one SAT test away from getting the Bright Future Scholarship. But going into this business and going into pursuing entrepreneurship, I didn't have that support. And so I had to dig deep with my own, in my own mind and my own self, and really question. And, you have all of this different noise. It's fascinating, Michael, because coming into the overall field of entrepreneurship, I had limiting beliefs that were ingrained with me growing up. And I just recorded a video about this the other day of, I went into Walmart and my eyes immediately went to the Great Value spices rather than the McCormick spices. But it's true. I was like, my eyes immediately went there rather than looking up ahead of me and looking at the organic or looking at the, the red label McCormick. And so I had limiting beliefs then. But then you get into business and the realm of self-development, and you listen, you read books, you find mentors, and you get all this more noise. And so even then, what I think is ironic, and I think would be a really great psychological study, would be how all of that self-development can impact you and create more limiting beliefs because of all of this noise that is surrounding you. And that's why it's important to find mentors that have validated success, and not to get a million different mentors. Find a few people, latch onto them, and really study them.
Wow. Who have been some of your mentors?
I would definitely say, from a law of attraction standpoint or a psychological standpoint, Bob Proctor. He went and he ended up passing away earlier this year, but he was a really significant virtual mentor, I like to call him. He lived a very full life. I have some other people, because I got my start in network marketing, and so I have certain mentors back then that I still actually kind of study and pay attention to and relate to. And I also like kind of the people that are a little bit, they rub people the wrong way because of how they hold themselves, but it's out of this aura of confidence. And so to mention one would be Grant Cardone. A lot of people don't like him. Simply, he's all about money. But if you look deeper, it's more about family values. It's more about being able to supply a life for his kids and for his wife. I would say, Andy Frisella, the founder of First Form, he's very aggressive politically, and I don't always agree with what he has. But I remember when I worked my second and only job I ever worked, and I would just listen to his podcast, the MFCEO podcast, nonstop for hours on end.
Gotcha. What did you get from that?
What did I get from that? It takes a certain mentality, and I think that mentality can, to a degree, be taught so it can be nurtured. But I think a lot of it is also nature. Whenever you're doing a sales training, some people just have a natural ability to sell versus somebody else who has to spend more time, kind of like the book smart. You have some kids who are able to just pick up a book and learn, and some other kids that need a little bit of extra help, and that's really great. So the mindset was great, but also the customer experience and the customer appreciation is huge. And so when I started having some success with my business and came on some good clients, I spent $400 at First Form. And it might sound stupid to mention, but I was ordering protein powder that's like $80, and I'm like, I had no second thought, no reservation about buying that and buying from that company, not only because he was a mentor of mine, but also because of the quality of product. And that right there is consumer trust or reputation. It's a reputation of the brand and a reputation of Andy as his personal brand and who he is. And so there's a really interesting correlation there.
I see. So, what I admire about that is you seem to have the ability to look at somebody and figure, kind of like spit out the bones, for lack of a better term, right? You don't have to take everything that they necessarily say, but you can identify, what is beneficial and what makes sense to you, and then just kind of let the rest of it go to the wayside. Yeah.
I think it's important to do that. Take the very best and leave the rest.
Yeah. And well, we often, I think, in our culture, want the lazy route of just, accepting everything that a person says, or just completely writing them off and not acknowledging the things that could be beneficial for us to hear. Yeah, nice.
Absolutely.
What is your coaching or training philosophy? And you can read philosophy here as like a system of thought or a map or a metaphor that kind of guides the way you work with people.
Yeah, well, through Mashman Ventures, we don't consider ourselves coaches. I think that the world of a coach has, you're either the best of the best or you're just another person with a title. Many entrepreneurs today are unemployed with a title, and so I lean into more of the consulting side. And so we're here to consult with you, to give you the strategies to actually work through your problems, and to tell you, hey, you should do this, do that. And coaches a lot of times help the person look inward and say, hey, this is what maybe you never saw in yourself, to where now you could find the answer, with your own strategy. But I like consulting because it kind of opens up the window, and it sounds better, right? But if I was to talk about philosophies, I would say, number one, a lot of times whenever people are building out their personal brands, and we need to have the conversation about what personal branding is. It is you. It is who you are, your name, your personality, your characteristics, your traits, what you're doing professionally, every single bit about you. It's who you are. And you didn't create your personal brand. And one of the things that, I and Eric Chow, who's the chief consultant of my firm, we always talk about and joke about is there's so many misconceptions online to where people think you have to create a new personal brand. And no, you just very simply have to build up off of what you've had your entire life. But many people online, they only focus on the professional side. They focus on, hey, I'm a 6 or 7, figure funnel builder, or hey, I'm running this business. And they completely miss the personal side of it. They miss the personality. And those mentors I mentioned earlier, the reason I like these mentors is because I relate to their story. Bob Proctor didn't come from money. Andy Frisella came from a very humble background, worked, a decade for his business. Grant Cardone was a drug addict. He lost his father at a young age. I never had my father growing up. And so I was able to relate with all these different people, but those are also the people that I'm mentioning in an interview. And so when it comes to training and working and consulting with people on how to build out their personal brand, we always emphasize the personal aspect, because many people today forget the personal aspect and they only focus on the profession. But to get longevity, you have to be personable. That's how people connect with you.
So it almost sounds like being more aware of who you already are as opposed to somebody that you want to become. Is that what you're saying?
I think it ties in. I think who you are to a large part is who you're going to still be. It's just going to be amplified. The cliche, money just amplifies who you are. Alcohol just amplifies more of who you are. And I don't think that really changes, but I think the world know about it.
So how did this work for you personally? Like, how did you apply this this idea of really building upon who you already were?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, Mashman Ventures and launching a PR firm wasn't my first business. It was not my second, not my third, not my fourth. It was my first actual LLC. But prior to that, I got involved with, like I said, network marketing. I did a clothing line. I went through over half a dozen different businesses, different ventures, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what I liked, what I didn't like. And all along, I was still positioning myself online as this young entrepreneur who was wanting to build a better life for himself. And so I had and developed this audience of people to where they didn't care what I was doing professionally, but they wanted to see me win personally. And so by the time I got involved and developed this awareness, people started coming to me out of my friend group saying, Isaac, help me with this. What can I do to make my brand better? What can I do to make my Instagram better? And all those different experiences helped me realize, hey, maybe I have a knack for this. And by the time I did it professionally, I realized the personal aspect, I launch a business, everybody wants to see me win because of who I am. Same thing with your friend group. And so it was very, very important. Very important.
A couple of weeks ago, you posted on LinkedIn the following. This is me quoting you at this point. Society encourages people to settle for quote-unquote normal, yet simultaneously victimizes the poor, villainizes those who choose to be different and become rich. Understand that you cannot and will not win this fight. Focus on your own pursuit. Be your own validation. End of quote. It's really powerful, and there's a lot here. To what extent does this post communicate the central message of your public influence?
Yeah, we could do an entire book on that post alone. Honestly, there's a lot to unpack. A 10, honestly, absolutely a 10. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't come from money, but also not coming from money helps you see the alternative perspective of how the poor view people with money. And a lot of times it's, oh, it must be nice, or oh, he came into money, or hey, there's this this silent, unspoken distaste for somebody in the family, maybe a relative that made six figures, and you're coming from maybe working in a cabinet shop, thinking about my grandfather making, Lord knows, $8-9 an hour, and maybe you have a family member who's making four times what you're doing with a third of the effort, and that can cause a lot of distaste. And then in society, there's this entire conversation of the poor. By being poor, you're viewed as, oh, you can't take care of your family. Oh, you're relying on the government. Oh, you're doing this. Or, oh, going to school with the secondary shoes. I remember going to school with like thrift shop shoes, and I hated it. I despised it, because all of a sudden I had another kid who was a friend who had a pair of Jordans that was worth more than my entire closet, it felt like. But at the same point, I felt like almost villainized. And I didn't have the ability to go to camp. I didn't have the ability to do all those different things. Now, on the alternative note, being rich is also villainized. So there's no happy medium here, because by being rich, you're saying, oh, why don't you donate more? Why don't you give away your money? There's been this entire conversation about, the rich taking, private jets and stuff like that. And rather than seeing it as, oh, they worked hard for their life, and, there's automatically going to be this villainization. We could argue that, the agricultural or the impacts on the environment, all day long. But very simply, being rich is not seen as a good thing. Person winning the lottery just recently, made $400 million. It's like people are going to talk down about that. But being in the middle class is what people seem to encourage. People want people to stay in the middle because that's where the middle is comfortable. And honestly, with the average American having less than $1,200 in their bank account and entering a recession and doing all these different things, it's like, I remember going to church and it's like everybody said to tithe, but they don't realize the rich people could tithe more than the middle class even ever could, talking about religion. And I think it's interesting because it's very emotional driven and very, very, very rarely talked about from a logical standpoint. And I've noticed in my own life, disregard that conversation entirely and just focus on, if you want to be rich, become rich. If you want to stay poor, stay poor. If you want to go and be in the middle class, go do whatever you want to do. But I'm going to be on my own path, and you could love or hate it, what I have going on, but I'm self-guided. I'm going to get it no matter what.
The way you talk makes me want to know like what your values are for Mashman Ventures. What are they?
Man, I'm looking over here because I have 9 over here that are up on the wall. But one of them, obviously the first one is to operate with morals and integrity. And coming into the PR space, and I won't spend too much time on this, but public relations has for decades had this negative stigma about it, because previously public relations firms were reserved for big oil companies, people in Hollywood, people who had something to cover up, a political thing, Watergate, we need to cover this up and direct the narrative, direct the conversation. But public relations in 2022, in the age of social media, is quite the opposite. It's now about establishing a reputation and maintaining it, not about covering it up. But at the same time, there are those people, those select firms that do focus on kind of the slimy things. And it's super easy now to fake your credibility, easier than ever, to buy your following online, to buy your articles, to buy your placements. And you're trying to convince other people that you're credible, rather than establishing, doing something that is worthy of the press talking about you. And so I and Eric, we've been featured in dozens of articles in the past 24 months, and we didn't pay for any of those out of pocket. And the reason why is because we put ourselves out there. We talked about something. We did something that was notable. I didn't pay for this interview. Sometimes people are paying for interviews. There's this article that came out recently. People are paying up to $50,000 to make a podcast appearance. Joe Rogan, I'm sure some people probably pay him. He's making probably a pretty penny. Or maybe not Joe Rogan, but definitely these other people that are in the top charts. And so that's important. The other thing is to, chase after your vision. And my previous podcast was called Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman. I recently ended that and leading into a new show coming out later this year. But I want every single person who's a member of our team, and even the clients that we work with, to really get this feeling that they can accomplish more. In my book, I talked about a lasting impression of increase. You need to leave a good first impression, good second impression. Every single time somebody talks with you, say, hey, you can accomplish more. Hey, you can do more out of life. And it's not that you're trying to convince them of a lie. It's very simply, you're trying to open up their eyes to something they didn't see previously in themselves. And that's not cliche. That's honest. And working with clients, especially establishing their voices and getting them known, not to sound too salesy, is extremely important, because then they can increase the narrative of whatever they're passionate about or interested in, or whatever their business is, therefore making a ripple effect.
So kind of moral question to kind of go along with that. How are your ventures in contributing to a more empathetic, sustainable world?
Yeah, that's a really really good question, and I think partly how I ended the last one is also the response to that because I've worked with some clients, some international clients, some other clients that might have different political viewpoints, but I have no issue expanding their message. I have no issue helping them get more exposure online. Regardless of a change in viewpoints, we might not share the same religion, we might not share the same political viewpoint, we might not share anything. I don't care about that. At the end of the day, you're somebody that I want to see win. I want to see you succeed because if all of us were the same, that would be for a very boring life. Imagine seeing from one color, one perspective. That isn't how, we go. I would honestly, I couldn't imagine being blind, being colorblind because like seeing the world and seeing these different things and seeing, looking out at the forest, it's like those are the things that really make life worth living. And I think having a difference in viewpoints is extremely important. And growing up, I didn't have a lot of that. I come from a very conservative right-wing household. And as I got older, I realized, man, okay, I agree with this. I absolutely hate this. I'm completely on the opposite when it comes to this. And I really started, developing my own viewpoint and developing my own mentality. But Mashman Ventures is all about kind of amplifying that conversation based off of their own interests and based off of their own businesses. So that's one way from an empathetic standpoint. And then I believe the second part was about sustainability, correct? Okay, so Mashman Ventures is my vehicle that is leading into my other businesses. And so Mashman Ventures might not be, talking and doing much for the environment right now from a sustainability standpoint, but it's helping me lead into my other businesses, which can do that. Mashman Properties, I'll launch at the beginning of this year. It's like, I want to eventually just own land and just say nature reserve. I want to own land and not do anything with it, just to keep it. And so from a sustainability, standpoint, I hate seeing the deforestation, right, of forests and such. Man, couldn't say that word very well.
That's okay. I've struggled with it from time to time too.
But then we get into the conversation of capitalism, and so it's really an interesting conversation.
Yeah, but you're part of it.
Yeah.
And you're staying a part of it. Last question: what's inspiring you these days?
What's inspiring me? Thought of who I'm becoming, and that goes back to thinking and really deciphering what you're doing this for, why you're doing it, why it's important. And so in my own life, thinking about, hey, what is the man I want to be? Who does that Isaac Mashman look like? I've already come a long way from who I was 5 years ago or a decade ago, before I even got into business. But now the question is, who am I going to be in the next 12 months, the next 24 months, the next 36 months, the next decade? And seeing those, comparisons from my past and saying, I don't want to be like that. Or this is something that I could pick up from my grandfather or my grandfather. Maybe this is a positive trait. And so that's something that is inspiring me because I know that there's some level of pursuit. And the pursuit is what makes it interesting and it makes it, rewarding, kind of seeing that reward pan out and really developing myself into that individual.
I'm curious how your conversations with your mom may have changed over the past couple of years as you've, become successfthat's How is that?
Michael, that might be one of my favorite questions I've ever been asked on any interview, written, audio, video, whatever. That's a really great question though, because they've evolved quite a bit, and she's seen the ups, she's seen the downs. I remember calling her one day, I'm like, oh man, I'm about to get a, $6,000 deal, and I lost that deal. And then I also remember calling her and coming back to visit, and I'm like, hey, I had a $9,000 month in December. What? And because it's cool. But she's seen the ups and she's seen the downs. And it's also interesting because the relationship has went through a lot of hardship because there's a time where when I first got started, I was a very early adult. I was very, very early. I was 17 when I got started in business, and I didn't turn 18 until after I graduated high school. And my first business trip, I was living with my grandparents and I went against what my mom wanted. And I went on that business trip. I was 17 at the time, took a bus up to New York City, and then went over to Minneapolis with some guys that were in my network marketing business I never met before. And coming back, over the past year, it's like, oh man, you're an adult. You've grown into this businessman or this figure. And there's a way for me to go, because the one thing that I don't like is ever feeling like an imposter. And so that motivates me even more to say, hey, let me go ahead and live up and actually, not necessarily prove you wrong and prove me right. I have certain people in my life I am like that with, but not so much my mom, but more so, let me go ahead and show you. Let me set the example. And so the conversations have definitely changed. And, she's also somebody in my life I want to be able to put into a position of power if I can, to be able to help. But at the same point, being very open you can only help somebody so much if they don't really want to help themselves. And so that's a very emotional conversation to get into, but it's an excellent question.
What are the projects that are in the forefront of your mind right now? Things that get you excited?
Definitely expanding and getting to the points where I could really go and take Mashman investments and Mashman properties to a higher degree, a higher level. Making some investments in some different companies. I already have a couple on my mind of people, within my network that I've known for years, investing and helping them win, and being able to be a silent partner or get a minority equity share. I like that. I want to be able to play Monopoly in real life, and that's part of what drives me. I want to be able to have the freedom and the capability to say, okay, well, hey, I own 5% of the company, kind of Shark Tank style. Let's go ahead and see what we could do to make it win, because I enjoy it. I thrive off of the dopamine, and that can be negative and positive at the same point. And I know you're smiling. I don't know if this is on video, but that's part of the reason that I enjoy this. And personal branding is all about expanding your message and getting more followers, getting more numbers, getting more attention, getting more expansion. So it's nice. But then also Mashman properties and being able to buy more land, buy more real estate. I bought my first 2 pieces of land earlier this year, just simple parcels of land. But I'm like, man, I toured it. I was like, this is my dirt. But that is something that drives me, because I see that piece of land that I'm standing on now, the 40 by 100 feet or the 50 by 120 feet, and I'm seeing, hey, this could be 100,000 acres. And that right there is something that I look forward to.
I want to thank my guests for taking the time to talk with me. These conversations are truly among the favorite parts of my work, and I'm so grateful to the many guests who have said yes to my invitation to hold space with me about this inward journey we are all making, or helping others make. I treasure these conversations. If you found the podcast beneficial, intriguing, insightful, you choose the positive word, please click the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Thank you so much for listening.